in America can the children of farm workers grow up to be winemakers and winery owners.
In the last 20 years, Ceja Wines has become a family affair. Together, they've earned top honors, including being poured at President Obama's inauguration. Amelia, have you reached your American dream?
I set out picking grapes, and now my family and I own vineyards, and we have our own wine brand that competes with the best wines in the world.
Every barrel steeped in history, and every glass a toast to the workers who made their American dreams realities. Great wines with even greater heart. That's NBC Nightly News for this Saturday. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
Tonight, the confusion over booster shots and the FDA panel's surprise recommendation. Only those over 65 and at a high risk for COVID get that extra dose. The next steps for full approval of the boosters. And we get answers to the questions so many have.
Why the number 65 and older? Why not 60 or 50?
Crisis at the border. The new plan for the U.S. to deport thousands of mainly Haitian migrants being held in Texas, and the surge of federal agents heading in. Capitol Hill on lockdown today, but the police outnumbered the protesters. Families of those killed in that Kabul drone attack speak out to NBC News after the Pentagon says the strike was a mistake. What they are demanding. Back to Earth. The first fully civilian crew in space returns today, their historic splashdown. The massive police search for the fiancé of the woman who went missing on their cross-country trip. He's now a person of interest and has gone missing too. Pet care crisis. Almost every state seeing a shortage of veterinarians. Pet owners seeking care turned away. What you need to know. And the families who went from picking grapes to owning vineyards, drinking in the American dream.
This is NBC Nightly News with Jose Diaz-Balart.
Good evening. There is confusion across the country tonight after that surprise recommendation to the FDA. The Biden administration was ramping up to offer booster shots for the COVID vaccine to all Americans over 16. But an FDA advisory panel bluntly rejected that, recommending only Americans over 65 and those at increased risk get that third shot. We know you have a lot of questions, so we're going to get answers from a panel of experts to help you make sense of it and make the right decisions for you and your family. But first, Kathy Park on that surprise vote.
More confusion tonight after the FDA Advisory Committee rejected Pfizer booster shots for most adults, but endorsed the extra dose for Americans over 65 and those at high risk, like cancer patients, organ transplant recipients, and the immunocompromised, plus healthcare workers more exposed to the virus. The panel deciding there was not enough evidence supporting a third dose for those 16 and older.
I guess it's slightly confusing, but I'm just going to rely on science.
I think we're as confused as we've been since the beginning of the COVID virus.
Pfizer made the case for boosters with data showing waning vaccine efficacy after 6 months. And after Friday's vote, said they will work with the FDA to address the committee's questions. And now questions about the Biden administration's widespread booster strategy after the president made this announcement last month.
8 months after your second shot, get a booster shot.
Biden's push for a third shot is getting pushed back from some of the nation's top medical experts who say he spoke too soon. The White House issued a statement writing in part, "We stand ready to provide booster shots to eligible Americans once the process concludes at the end of next week." That process includes an official sign-off by the FDA, which could come as early as next week. Then the CDC's vote. It could be just days before millions more Americans roll up their sleeves again.
And Kathy joins us now. Kathy, do we know when Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters will be considered?
Well, Jose, the timetable is still a bit unclear at this point, but we do know that Moderna filed an application with the FDA this month. J&J has not, but they are still engaged with the agency. Jose?
Kathy Park in New York, thank you. If the new booster recommendations have you a little confused, you're not alone. We want to cut through that confusion now with the help of 4 top medical experts. The 2 main questions on most people's minds, is it safe and is it effective? Let's start with safety.
Is it dangerous? Is a booster dangerous?
There's not really a danger.
Is there enough scientific evidence, information on its efficiency, on its safety?
It is 100% safe. The booster shot is very safe for most of the population.
Our doctors agree there are no major negative health consequences to getting a booster shot. But the second big question, is a booster shot effective, is more complicated.
When does that art start shifting towards the downward in the 2-regimen vaccine that we've been receiving?
Yes, so you begin to get some waning of antibody protection sometime around 6 to 8 months later. And that affects principally older people.
In Israel, they've already started giving 3rd doses of the Pfizer vaccine to everyone over 12. Dr. Dan Weinberger studied those over 60 who received a booster there and found they were 11 times less likely to get infected and 20 times less likely to suffer severe illness.
We can clearly see that for people who are at high risk, for older adults and those with underlying conditions, getting that additional dose can potentially provide some additional protection against severe disease.
But what about those under 60?
It's not clear yet for younger individuals who are at lower risk for severe disease whether the booster is needed.
There's not as much evidence for younger people, but it's believed their immunity is holding up better.
The message for younger people, for 16 and over, what would you say to those people?
They're very well protected at this point.
Among younger people, the protection of the vaccine remains very staunch.
What do you say to a 55-year-old who says, you know what, I'm seeing a lot more cases around me. I'm just going to go try and get that 3rd shot?
Certainly, I don't think that there's danger in doing that. It's not probably going to cause them any harm. It just may not do them as much good either.
But all our experts warn it may not be worth it.
No medical or pharmaceutical or vaccine intervention is completely benign.
We don't like to give medications or vaccines to people who don't really need them.
And you can visit planyourvaccine.com to find more information. Now to the growing crisis along the Texas border where thousands of Haitian migrants are stranded beneath the bridge. Tonight, a surge of federal agents are heading in, and we now know more about the administration's new strategy to get the migrants back home. Morgan Chesky reports from Del Rio, Texas.
Beneath this border bridge in Del Rio, Texas, a group of migrants grows by the hour. The men, women, and children, mostly from Haiti. Tonight, they number nearly 15,000, tripling in size since Wednesday. All waiting in near 100-degree heat, washing clothes in the Rio Grande and sleeping outside for a chance to claim asylum.
We need the administration, Secretary Mayorkas, the vice president, and the president to call this what it is. This is a crisis.
With staff unable to keep up with processing, state lawmakers are calling on Washington for help. In response, DHS promising a massive movement of migrants, announcing 400 Border Patrol agents are en route. The agency also resuming deportation flights to Haiti within 72 hours, adding our borders are not open and people should not make the dangerous journey. With Del Rio's only border crossing now temporarily closed, the city losing cross-border business daily until the migrant situation is under control.
We're just a small town and trying to hold on to
Many of the migrants have spent years living in South America before choosing to make the dangerous trip north. This man sharing how he's just one of thousands still on the way. Tonight, many of these people could soon be headed to the island nation, still reeling from a massive earthquake barely 1 month ago. What is your message to the president tonight?
President Biden, close the border. Take action to secure our country. You have abandoned citizens of Del Rio, Texas. Take the action to close this border.
And Morgan, Governor Abbott is mobilizing state law enforcement to the border.
Yeah, Jose, he certainly is. In fact, he has pledged 1,000 state troopers and Texas Rangers to help try to control this scene. And in fact, in just the last hour or so, we know that state troopers parked their cruisers essentially on the banks of the Rio Grande to try to stem the flow of those migrants. Jose?
Morgan Chesky in Del Rio, Texas, thank you. The families of those killed in last month's Afghanistan drone strike are speaking out tonight following the Pentagon's stunning admission yesterday that the blast accidentally killed civilians. Their loved ones now saying that apology simply isn't enough. Matt Bradley reports.
The U.S. military may have apologized.
I'm here today to set the record straight and acknowledge our mistakes. I offer my sincere apology.
But for the families of 10 innocent Afghan civilians, including 7 children killed in a drone strike in Kabul last month, saying sorry won't bring back the dead. How could this happen after such strong intelligence and they tell us that it was a mistake? Hamid Ahmadi lost several family members in what the Pentagon now calls a tragic mistake. They should have investigated it. Now they apologize, and it doesn't finish with apologizing. You see what's happened here. The Defense Department had said that their August 29th drone strike stopped an imminent attack by ISIS-K, the same group whose suicide bombing on Kabul airport days earlier killed 13 U.S. troops and nearly 200 Afghans. But investigations by multiple media organizations and U.S. Central Command now say no ISIS fighters were killed, that we were civilians and innocent. Instead, it targeted the car of Zamir Ahmadi, seen putting water jets in it, not bombs. He had actually worked for U.S. aid groups. They shouldn't kill innocent people. Matt Bradley, NBC News, London.
Capitol Hill was in major lockdown today. The reason? A rally in support of those jailed from the January 6th riots there. But today's event came and went largely without incident. Garrett Haake spent the day with a small crowd of protesters. Garrett, what happened?
Jose, Capitol Police have been preparing for this rally for weeks. They've been concerned that a far-right crowd demonstrating in support of people arrested after the January 6th insurrection could become violent. So they reinstalled the fence around the Capitol complex and brought in a multi-state police force, a massive police force, to deal with a large-scale event that never really materialized. Capitol Police say only about 400 people were in the protest area at peak today. Probably about half of those were journalists. Capitol Police say they did make 4 arrests, 3 for weapons charges. Jose?
Garrett Haake in Washington, D.C., thank you. Another historic journey to space is on the books tonight. The SpaceX Dragon capsule has splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida with the world's first all-civilian 4-member crew. Candace Gibson is in Port Canaveral. Candace, this adventure has been groundbreaking in so many ways.
It has been groundbreaking. It shows that the sky is really no limit for civilians. And I'll tell you, we heard this gigantic thud here in Port Canaveral as that Dragon capsule made its way through the atmosphere. And then that just beautiful landing in the Atlantic Ocean, wrapping up this beautiful journey.
Tonight, the return to Earth, the first all-civilian space crew to orbit the Earth, wrapping their history-making 3-day mission.
We're giving all of our time right now to science research and some ukulele playing, and trying to raise some good awareness for an important cause for us back on Earth.
The Inspiration 4 billion Jared Isaacman, who's bankrolling the trip, bone cancer survivor Haley Arsenault, Cyan Proctor, the first Black woman to pilot a spacecraft, and Chris Dombrowski, who won his ticket through a sweepstakes. Their last hours in space spent taking in the views, snapping photos in the specially designed capsule dome, even chatting with Bono. They blasted off from Cape Canaveral Wednesday evening on a SpaceX rocket. Their capsule, the Dragon measuring 13 feet wide, their home as they whizzed around Earth at 17,000 miles an hour.
It's been really interesting to see fluid shifts with this microgravity environment.
The mission, part science to determine the effects of space on the human body, and part charity. More than $150 million raised for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, where Arsenault works. Patients there are getting a rare treat Thursday.
Are the cows on the moon? I hope there will be one day.
Their trip highlighting a new era in space travel and opening the new frontier to anyone with big dreams.
So, Ken, as they splashed down just minutes ago, what happens next?
Well, I'll tell you, a helicopter is going to pick them up from the recovery ship, bring them to land, and a celebration is planned here in Florida as soon as tomorrow. Jose?
Candace Gibson in Port Canaveral, Florida. Thank you. Coming up, the massive police search for the person of interest in that missing person mystery. Now he's gone missing too. Also, the animals you love, now at risk because of a growing pet care crisis. We'll explain. We're back with a mystery gripping the nation, the desperate search for a missing woman gone after a cross-country trip with her fiancé. But now he has gone missing too. Emily Ikeda has details.
Tonight, police and the FBI descending on a Florida park in search of Brian Laundrie, the avid outdoorsman believed to be in the depths of this 25,000-acre reserve, and police say he could be in danger.
There's an enormous amount of pressure, I'm sure, on him to provide answers on what's going on here.
As the fiancé of missing Gabby Petito, Brian is a person of interest and seen as a critical figure in solving the disappearance of the 22-year-old travel blogger.
Clear the roadway!
Friday night, a chaotic scene outside of the Laundrie home. And yet another twist, Northport police learning Brian's family hasn't seen him since Tuesday.
Why did they wait until yesterday to tell you that this is... That's a great question. We're going by the family's word of where they think that he's at.
Gabby's loved ones writing, Brian is not missing, he is hiding. Gabby is missing. The couple's young love displayed on social media, a sharp contrast to the police body camera video from their trip last month.
I was invited one morning and he wouldn't let me in the car before. He told me I needed to go down.
On the advice of counsel, Brian has remained tight-lipped since returning from the couple's cross-country trek with their van, but without Gabby.
Where is Gabby?
Brian's silence on the case, a point of frustration among the young woman's family.
Why did they get a lawyer the second he got home?
Dateline's Andrea Canning sitting down with Gabby's father, desperation setting in.
I want people to do everything we can. I need her to come home.
At least half a dozen agencies now weighing in on the complicated case. Still, the week closing out with more questions than answers. Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
Still ahead, why caring for your best friend is getting more difficult. The critical shortage now putting pets at risk. We've reported extensively on the staffing shortages at critical industries across the country, but now there's one that's hitting home for many of us. There aren't enough veterinarians to care for all our pets. Some animals in need of help are being turned away. Megan Fitzgerald explains.
It's been a tough year and a half for all of us. But these little guys made things a little better.
So is this a pandemic pet?
Yes. Yeah. Pandemic pets are a thing. More than 12.5 million households got one since March of last year.
It's the first time we've seen the shelters empty in Chicago for 20 years, which is amazing.
But with the good,
Can we get you in the room? Yeah, sure.
comes the not so good.
It's super busy.
At this animal hospital in Chicago, hours were already reduced because of COVID. Now, with a 30% increase in visits, they're trying to keep up.
We are seeing massive uptick in appointments. It's been a great opportunity for us at this hospital in terms of just shifting how do we see more patients. So getting creative with having curbside drop-offs, having people wait outside with their pets.
A crisis of care playing out across the country. Nearly every state reporting a shortage of veterinarians, leaving pet owners anxious.
We didn't have any appointments, so it was like defeating to be able to not do anything.
The demand is just exceeding our ability to keep up.
I requested a spay and neuter of 2 siblings, kittens. They gave me a month waiting time.
The situation so dire, this animal hospital in Boston forced to ration care.
The caseload is so large that we are seeing some nights only life-threatening emergencies.
And this one in Tucson, turning away rescues who often require more medical attention.
They had lost a vet
and they could no longer do rescue. But Dr. Kelly Karen says there are things pet owners can do to keep their animals safe.
It is so important for pet parents to be proactive. Schedule your appointments early. Call your vet the instant that you're sensing a problem.
And always do the recommended lab work at visits. It can help identify any problems. Vets say early detection and actions can help loosen the load on everyone. In Chicago, Megan Fitzgerald, NBC News.
When we come back, Fields of American Dreams. How a new generation is breaking new ground in beautiful California wine country. There's good news tonight about the American dream. During this Hispanic Heritage Month, we celebrate those who are part of the backbone of our nation, who have achieved so much for themselves and their families. For generations, they worked in the vineyards as migrant workers from Mexico, picking grapes for others.
They left the comfort of their homes to do something better for themselves.
Planting seeds for future generations in California's Napa.
My father was born in a very remote village, and his dream for his family was to come to El Norte, the United States.
Amelia Ceja started picking grapes with her father when she was just 12. Now, she's the first Mexican-American woman elected president of a winery, running Ceja Vineyards, spanning 133 acres in Sonoma.
My father's journey changed the course of all the generations to come, not just ours now, but future generations.
Lidia Maldonado and her high school sweetheart Hugo carved a cave in the hills of Calistoga. There, they produce more than 10,000 cases of wine each year.
Pero todos son franceses.
Both families, descendants of migrant workers.
My father, my father-in-law, that's 100 combined years or more of vineyard labor.
Bottling culture and their Mexican-American heritage with every Cabernet and Chardonnay, and never forgetting where they came from. One of your labels, one of your wines is called Farm Worker.
That's right. Yeah.
Why?
Because that's ultimately, that is who we are. That is what we are. That is how we got here.
Have you reached your American dream?
Definitely. Only in America can the children of farm workers grow up to be winemakers and winery owners.
In the last 20 years, Ceja Wines has become a family affair. Together, they've earned top honors, including being poured at President Obama's inauguration. Amelia, have you reached your American dream?
I set out picking grapes, and now my family and I own vineyards, and we have our own wine brand that competes with the best wines in the world.
Every barrel steeped in history, and every glass a toast to the workers who made their American dreams realities. Great wines with even greater heart. That's NBC Nightly News for this Saturday. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
On this edition for Saturday's September 18th, supporters for some arrested in the January 6th Capitol riot rally in Washington, D.C. A changed Supreme Court on the anniversary of the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and exploring unconscious bias. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wackenheim III, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, the Anderson Family Fund, the estate of Worthington Mayo Smith, Leonard and Norma Clorfine, the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, Koo and Patricia Ewan, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg. We try to live in the moment, to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Hill in for Hari Srinivasan. A rally in front of the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. drew only a few hundred protesters today. The event was called Justice for J6. That's a reference to the hundreds of people arrested in the January 6th attack on Congress. Police in riot gear lined the area. A temporary fence was reinstalled to prevent access to the Capitol. The rally organizer, who worked as a staff member in former President Donald Trump's failed re-election campaign, tried to separate his group from those charged with violent assaults during the deadly rioting.
This is about the many people who were there that day who have not been charged with violence, not been accused of assaulting a police officer, destroying property, and disparate treatment they've received. This is about equal treatment under the law.
The event lasted less than an hour and a half, and there were no major incidents reported. NewsHour correspondent Lisa Desjardins was in the Capitol on January 6th, and she's there today covering the rally, law enforcement, and security.
The focus of this rally was to be on those people who have been arrested from January 6th with nonviolent crimes who are still being detained. Those behind the rally say that indefinite detention bridges those people's constitutional rights, and they are very careful to say they're separating out those with nonviolent offenses, largely trespassing inside the U.S. Capitol, with those who have violent offenses like assaulting police officers. We know of the some 600 people arrested for January 6 crimes, that about 200 or so have those more violent crimes charged against them. There are more that have trespassing and lesser crimes charged. Now, when you talk to those counter-protesters here, they say that that's a dangerous message. They say that the justice system locks up people for small crimes, including small drug crimes, for indefinite periods of time, often, and that they think that this is a crowd that doesn't understand that. Now, the bigger question, of course, what we were waiting to see and what we came prepared for a variety of responses to was what security would look like here. How big was the crowd? Was there any violence? And there was no violence. This was a peaceful crowd. It was not a large crowd. I would say in the hundreds, perhaps 500 or so, maybe a little more, give or take. It was hard to make out how large the crowd was, though, Michael, because the truth is there were probably as many members of the media here covering this event as there were supporters behind the cause of the rally.
And Lisa, it didn't seem to last very long either.
You know, the rally was intended to last about an hour or two, and it did seem to come in around that time. Many of the folks who came either for or against the rally stayed. There also were a large number of, honestly, something I'm calling January 6th tourists around the Capitol. As fences go up, you often see people come here to take pictures of the fences. There were a few flashpoints that I witnessed. Largely, those were centered around a single individual. Of course, with these things, you draw people with passionate opinions. And there were occasions, I saw one or two, where police gathered around someone like that who was shouting, seemed to be acting out, and then those people were taken away in the different incidents. We were also watching very carefully for whether that moment when those who support this cause and largely who support former President Trump walked by, those who do not, those who here were shouting against former President Trump, whether that would be a flashpoint, and by and large it was not. The crowd here was told to try and stay peaceful, and it did. But Michael, when you talk to people here, you really understood that the divide in America is still so sharp. This was a small crowd, but they did feel strongly, as did the counter-protesters here. And those views have not changed since a year from a year ago, before the election, or since January 6th.
With all the members of the media there, no doubt some of them were looking out to see if any members of Congress would show up to support this rally.
No members of Congress were here today. In fact, I did not see any elected lawmakers of any sort. It's possible I missed some state or local representatives, but Republicans made a decision that they did not want members of Congress to be here. And right now you hear some of the larger trucks that have been serving as barricades moving away from this area as sort of you can see now the phasing out of this security plan is happening. That's good news for people in Washington. It is a question of whether there will be any kind of political repercussions or sort of lasting effects of this rally. Will the cause of the people put in jail for January 6th remain? I don't know. I know that the organization behind us says that they will keep at it.
Lisa, who were the people speaking there and what did they say?
The speakers were a variety, including the man behind this rally, who's a former Trump campaign staffer, high-ranking staffer. But they also included the relatives of some of the people jailed currently for January 6th. Now, I will say that this crowd contained a full spectrum of ideas about January 6th. I spoke to people here who believe that all of the footage, all of the reporting we've done, what I personally saw on January 6th was not true. They believe the whole thing was a setup. They believe that no one should be in prison for January 6th. Those people were here at this rally. There also were people who disregard that, know that those are falsehoods, and who say we're still concerned about those who are in jail for lower level misdemeanor crimes. And by the way, those people tell me, we are not happy with the Republican Party. We're not happy with President Biden. Who are they happy with? President Trump.
Lisa, thank you.
You're welcome.
The U.S. will deport thousands of Haitian migrants in Del Rio, Texas, along the U.S.-Mexico border in the next few days. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. The move comes after thousands of Haitian asylum seekers assembled around a bridge in Del Rio earlier this week. Today's DHS statement said 2,000 migrants were moved out of the border area to other locations for possible removal from the U.S. The department also said it will send more than 400 agents to the Del Rio border region. After the devastating 2010 earthquake in Haiti, large numbers of asylum seekers reportedly migrated to camps near the U.S.-Mexico border, many near Tijuana. The U.S. has deported many using expulsion flights that send the migrants back to an impoverished country racked with political instability and still recovering from a recent earthquake and other disasters. France's ambassador to Australia left the country's capital, Canberra, today as trade deal tensions between the two countries continue to escalate. France recalled its ambassadors from Australia and the United States after Australia suddenly canceled a major contract for French-designed submarines in favor of a deal with the United States. As he departed his residence, the French ambassador said he was looking forward to coming back after some reassessment.
I'm still confident in the Australian-French corporations. I think this has been a huge mistake, a very, very bad handling of a partnership, because it was not a contract, it was a partnership.
Former Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who presided over the North African country for 2 decades, has died. Born in 1937, Bouteflika went on to successfully fight for his country's independence from France in the 1950s and 60s. In 1999, he became president and soon after negotiated a peace deal with Islamic insurgents that ushered in a period of stability for the oil-rich nation. But during his time in office, corruption flourished. In 2019, under pressure from mass protests for seeking a 5th term in office, Bouteflika stepped down. Abdelaziz Bouteflika was 84 years old. Robert Durst, the multimillionaire real estate heir suspected of killing 3 people over the last 4 decades, was found guilty of homicide yesterday in California. Durst was only on trial for killing his best friend Susan Berman in 2000, but Los Angeles County prosecutors argued Durst murdered Berman and 2 others, his wife who disappeared in 1982, and a neighbor in Texas who discovered his identity during the time he was hiding from police. Durst was not in the courtroom for the verdict. He was in isolation in jail after being exposed to someone with the coronavirus. The 78-year-old faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the latest national and international news, visit pbs.org/newshour. When freelance journalist Jessica Nordell was starting out, she sent editors a lot of pitches, but had a hard time getting them accepted. She then began pitching under a gender-neutral name, J.D. Nordell, and immediately had more success. The experience set her on a path of researching and writing about unconscious bias for more than a decade, and eventually publishing a book. The End of Bias, A Beginning, comes out on Tuesday. Nordell recently spoke with NewsHour Weekend special correspondent Megan Thompson.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that bias affects all of us every day, because anytime a person is interacting with another person, there's the opportunity for stereotypes and associations to infect the interaction. These reactions can often happen so quickly and automatically that we don't actually know we're necessarily doing them. These are reactions that conflict with our values.
So someone might think, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist, but then if they do have an unconscious bias, they may behave in a way that goes against what they believe.
Exactly. So unconscious bias is a term that a lot of people are familiar with, but we might also call it unintended bias or unexamined bias. We know that it's extremely pervasive. We see it in education, where Black students are penalized more for the same infractions. We see it in the workplace, where women and women of color in particular are often passed over for desirable assignments. We see it in policing, where Black men are more likely to be on the receiving end of force, even when completely compliant with an officer's orders, and even when no arrests are made. I mean, we see it all over the place.
Nordell says, while there's plenty of research out there on specific instances of bias, she couldn't find any studies on the cumulative impacts of bias over time.
Because we know that bias doesn't just happen once or twice, it happens continually over a day, over months, over an entire career. So what I did in order to try to answer this question was team up with a computer scientist and develop a computer simulation of a workplace.
Nordell's workplace was called NormCorp, and it started out with equal numbers of men and women. Opportunity for advancement was based on a promotability score. Nordell then inserted into her fake company bias that research shows exists in the real world, like devaluation of a woman's performance. If a female employee succeeded on a project, she received 3% less of a score boost than a man. Also, losing credit. So if a woman worked with a man on a successful project, she received 3% less of a reward. The consequence of it all? More men were promoted than women. Nordell ran the simulation over 20 promotion cycles.
So what we found was that when we introduced only a 3% difference in the way that men and women were treated in this simulation, it resulted in a leadership tier of our corporation that was 87% men. So we found that it doesn't actually take very much bias to create the kind of disparities that we see in the real world.
Nordell says in her research she found pretty straightforward ways organizations can interrupt bias, like standardizing criteria for hiring and promotions. In the field of medicine, where bias can have deadly consequences, doctors can use a simple checklist for care to ensure everyone is treated the same.
So if a bias is unconscious, how can we as individuals recognize them and address them?
Once we start to develop the habit of noticing what's happening in our own mind and actually seeing these reactions in real time, it's extremely powerful. Another thing that we can do is learn history. There's something called the Marley hypothesis, which was named after Bob Marley, who said, if you don't know your history, you don't know where you're coming from. And the research shows that as people's knowledge of the past increases, their ability to see present-day discrimination also increases.
We're doing this interview in Minneapolis, which is where you live and where you wrote your book. And while you were writing the book, the George Floyd murder and its aftermath unfolded practically in your backyard.
Mm-hmm. When George Floyd was murdered, I was just finishing this manuscript, and what I was looking for were examples of behavior change. One that I can share with you is a program that was developed in South Los Angeles about 10 years ago. Police were told, instead of having their goal be arrests, their goal was to create relationships with the community that they served. And in fact, what they were told is that what they should do is treat that community as though they were members of their own family. Over time, what happened was community members reported that police were starting to treat them with more dignity, with more respect. Something else that happened was arrests went down, but additionally, violent crime went down. There's actually a really close connection between police legitimacy on one hand and law-abiding behavior on the other.
Is there a silver bullet here?
There's no silver bullet. I mean, this is a problem that's huge, it's complicated, it's going to take a lot of different approaches, and it's going to take really all of our collective efforts to solve. But the good news is, I mean, it's a human invention. This is a human problem. And I think that, you know, if we are really dedicated to it and we use evidence-based approaches, we can really make an impact and make a dent in the problem.
Today marks the first anniversary of the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Former President Trump appointed Amy Coney Barrett to replace the late justice after previously appointing Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh to the High Court. On Monday, October 4th, the justices will begin their next term in person for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic required them to hear cases remotely. For more on how the court has changed and what's ahead, I spoke with Amy Howell, co-founder of SCOTUS Blog, a website covering the U.S. Supreme Court. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Please give us an idea of how much this court has changed since the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg just a year ago.
The most immediate impact we've seen of the death of Justice Ginsburg and the replacement by Justice Barrett has been on what's known as the shadow docket, the emergency requests for the court to step in and block an execution, to put a lower court ruling on hold. One of the most recent examples has been the request by abortion providers in Texas to put the Texas law barring almost all abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy on hold. And so in that case, you had the Chief Justice John Roberts joining the court's now 3 liberal justices to say, we should intervene and put this law on hold while we figure it out. But there were only 4 votes. You need 5 votes to put the law on hold. So I have no doubt that had Justice Ginsburg been on the court, the law would not be in effect in Texas right now.
What's to come, though, as we talk about the cases that we already know about and what impact we have seen so far? What's to come? What should we anticipate going forward?
There are two big cases coming up in the upcoming term, which starts on the first Monday in October, on issues that are really near and dear to conservatives, abortion and gun rights. And in both of those cases, I think these are scenarios in which there were 4 conservative votes that may not have been quite certain where the Chief Justice might have stood or whether or not he would be willing to go ahead and issue kind of a broad sweeping ruling on abortion rights and on gun rights. But now that they have Justice Barrett, they're likely more confident that they've got a 5th vote. And so the question is the court going to overrule Roe versus Wade? There's a case that's likely going to be argued in December called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And it's a challenge to a Mississippi law that bans most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And the state in that case has asked the court to overrule Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which are the cases establishing a woman's right to an abortion. And then in November, the Supreme Court's going to hear oral argument in a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, involving the right to carry a gun outside of your home. The Supreme Court said about 10 years ago that there is a basic right to have a handgun in your home, but didn't really say much more than that. And the conventional wisdom, obviously we don't know what's going on inside the Supreme Court, but the conventional wisdom is that there were 4 votes to say more about what the Second Amendment means outside the home, but that they weren't sure about the Chief Justice. But Amy Coney Barrett, as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, had written a dissent in a gun rights case that suggested she might be more open to a ruling on gun rights. So those are 2 cases that we're watching very closely, where it seems like the death of Justice Ginsburg and the nomination and confirmation of Justice Barrett could really make a difference.
Is it me or is it reality that a lot of the justices have been speaking lately? We're talking about Barrett, we're talking about Justice Stephen Breyer, we're talking about Clarence Thomas at the University of Notre Dame.
Certainly Justice Breyer has a new book to promote, so that explains a lot of his appearances, certainly. But we've heard from Justice Barrett and from Justice Thomas, and I think one possibility is that the justices may be kind of sensitive to the criticism of their ruling in the Texas abortion case, their ruling in the federal eviction moratorium case. And so they are speaking out because they are worried about the perceptions of the court, and they want to push back against the idea that the court is divided or partisan, particularly as they get ready to start a new term in which they're going to be hearing these high-profile cases on issues on which the court is likely to be divided again. And then, of course, Justice Breyer has been promoting his book, but he has been getting a lot of questions about retirement. And so we will be on Justice Breyer retirement watch all year long. It's hard for me to see him not retiring after this term, but one thing that I've learned is that when I make predictions about the Supreme Court, I'm often wrong. So we'll certainly see and find out probably sometime in late June or early July.
Amy Howe is the co-founder of SCOTUS Law. Amy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
This is PBS NewsHour Weekend, Saturday.
Finally tonight, it is World Cleanup Day, and in more than 180 countries, people picked up trash to make a statement and make a difference. It's the 11th year of the event, and in every location, plastic products make up a big part of the environmental problem. NewsHour Weekends' Christopher Booker has the story of what may be one small solution.
On one of Spain's Canary Islands, off the coast of Northwest Africa, plastic waste washes on shore relentlessly, much of it in the form of tiny beads that mingle with the black and white sand.
This is the only residue that floats. Imagine what is in the ocean. If it's difficult to collect what's on the beach, imagine what it's like to collect the stuff in the ocean. The amount of plastic is brutal.
Humberto Les left his job in Barcelona last year, determined to do something about the flood of plastic.
There are thousands and thousands of these pebbles on the coast of Gran Canaria.
With no way to stop the incoming plastic, he decided to use his design skills to turn plastic waste into plastic furniture.
Why make furniture? Because it is a way of giving it a lifespan that is similar to plastic. If plastic lasts years, why make something that will last months or weeks? I'll create a product that lasts years like plastic does.
From beach to manufacturing use takes several steps.
This is the material. Once it has been cleaned, crushed, and dried, it's useful to test our products and determine whether they are suitable for manufacturing.
First to market will be these round clothes hangers. A small plastic footstool is in the works. The designer admits some of the beach plastics can't be reused, but picking it up is part of his contribution to cleaning up plastic pollution.
I recommend that people join a beach cleanup or one in a natural spot to gain awareness about how much damage humans do.
That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Michael Hill. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wackenheim III, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, the Anderson Family Fund, the estate of Worthington Mayo Smith, Leonard and Norma Clorfine, the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, Koo and Patricia Ewan, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities, Barbara Hope Sucker. We try to live in the moment, to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by Consumer Cellular and by